Order, call the roll. Good.
Yeah.
Great, now that I'm off.
2020 budget hearing with executive session. Trustee Fenton?
Here.
Trustee Dodge?
Here.
Trustee Calandrella?
Here.
Trustee Healy?
Here.
Trustee Katsinas? Trustee Malani?
Here.
Mayor Pika?
Here. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The fiscal year 2020 budget hearing. George, if you'd like to start us off.
Mr. Mayor and Village Board, this is the last of the budget meetings. I should say, this is the second to the last. If you recall on your schedules, October 28th was a meeting date that was reserved, and we would like to hold that. We would like to still meet on the 28th. It's at that time we're going to talk about the Village Board's amendment requests and personnel as well. So it'll be the same time. We'll do it the 28th.
Okay.
I will turn it over to Anne Marie now.
And I'm not going to talk for long, and I'm going to turn it over to the departments. So this is kind of the second half of the departments presenting their budgets to the board. So we'll go through the remaining departments, the discretionary items that were submitted for each of these departments, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll kind of go through just really quickly those other funds that we budget for, just to kind of touch on the entire budget. So I'm going to pass it off to Rich.
The first part of this Public Works budget includes the Public Works Administration, building maintenance, transportation and vehicles and equipment. Some bigger changes from last year, or some continuation of the projects from last year. We'll be completing the rest of the LED streetlight conversions on the state and county roads. We'll continue the implementation of the street lighting, or smart lighting, which is a street lighting monitoring and control system. We'll have facility upgrades in several buildings throughout the year. Also, this is phase 2 of the Sportsplex HVAC system upgrades. Primarily is the soccer fields at Sportsplex. We've also, you'll notice that the significant reduction in the costs at the PACE bus or transportation division as we replaced the PACE bus program with the ADA transit program. Another big difference you might notice is the salt costs are a little higher this year. There was a per ton cost of over 180% from last year's salt cost to this year's. I think that's about it. Do you have any questions?
Any questions on Public Works?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Calandrella.
I was just wondering, kind of an update on how's that PACE? I know we transitioned from our traditional PACE bus program to a little bit of the current program. How's that going so far?
It's being fairly well received. We got about averaging just over 100 riders per month right now.
And we have the new van now, right?
Yes, we have the PACE van.
Just wanted to check in. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
I just have a question. Are we going to talk about the discretionary items for each department now or at the end?
We did it at the end. If
Okay.
the board prefers, we can jump back
We
and
just
forth.
do it at the end,
Okay.
just like we did the last
Yep,
time.
yep.
That seemed to work. The only thing I have, and this will go across all, so I won't bring it up for all of the other departments, but we talked about it with Development Services, and George and I talked about it a little bit today. We were cutting, I think through the ERA, about 18 positions. Well, I go back again and I'm looking 2017 to 2020, and we're seeing increases pretty much everywhere, but they're reshuffled and categorized in different areas. So George and I spoke about, he's going to go back and kind of look at this in totality and see where all the bodies have gone and what we have, so that we make sure that we are actually holding to that. I think we all know that we added 2 positions back for in technology because we basically gutted the entire department. But otherwise, I believe the other positions are supposed to remain cut. So just so that everybody knows it, that's one of the reasons I think for the October 28th, is that you can go back and look at all that and see where everything's gone, because there's been a lot of shifting around. Okay.
Okay, the second part of the Public Works includes, is from the Water and Sewer Fund. It would include the Water Department, or Water Division, Sewer Division, and Stormwater. Probably noticed that most of these divisions have significant decrease from the 2019 funding. We've had a lot of projects that have been on the books, a lot of stuff that got carried over from year to year and previously that we're trying to finish up that are going to get carried over into 2020. So there were a lot less projects asking, or requests for projects funding in 2020.
Rich, you have to talk into the microphone more.
Sorry.
It's on.
We can't hear you back there.
Are there any questions on the water fund? Okay.
All right. Police. Did you skip over police? There you go. It's police.
Police?
Police? Yeah,
We're just so quiet, no one knows where I'm
All right, good evening. There are no significant changes in the police budget for any special projects, capital, or personnel this year versus last year. However, we would like to note that the 2018 statistics recently released by the FBI showed that we had the lowest number of index crimes since 1994, going back almost 25 years, and that we had the lowest number of violent crimes, 20, of any town of 50,000 or over. Our 2019 statistics are about 3.9% lower than last year at this time. Domestic violence calls and our crisis intervention team calls for service remain very high and require significant resources to address them. Coincidentally, over the last 3 years, we've applied for a grant from the Department of Justice to assist in that matter, and we recently were notified that we've received a $700,000 grant from the Department of Justice, which will fund a program between ourselves and Trinity Services, for whom we already give referrals to on mental health cases. In 2020, we'll be in the planning stage, where equipment will be provided to our CIT officers, the 35 officers and the 2 supervisors, to document all the calls for Trinity Services. They will open up an office in Orland Park, and they will be on staff in the Orland Park Police Department for most of the day. So what will happen in 2021, after the planning is completed, they will respond with us on CIT calls. We will stabilize the situation, and Trinity Services personnel will take over the matter once it's stabilized to determine what the problem is, what the crisis is, and what type of referral, voluntary or involuntary, will be made. The following year, about 6 other towns will come on board for this, and it'll be regional in nature. So it should take a very heavy load office that is already costing us about $800,000 a year in man hours to address the CIT calls that we have. We have 3 discretionary requests that are before you. The village manager addressed them. I don't want to go any further than that because you can do them at the end, and we're frankly satisfied with the results. We're not looking to change anything from the standpoint of the discretionary requests with what the village manager has done already. The only capital requests we actually had were police cars, 9, and of course, those, many of the cars that would be replaced are moved down in the fleet to our community service officers as well as to development services. So I believe 5 of the 9 are going to be repurposed in those other departments. And I think that's all I have at this point. Any questions?
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
Tim, and I guess, Ann, if I look at 22.6 versus 21.2, it's about a 6% total change. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of that, there's obviously some salary increases, but that's about on par with what we've known and assumed, and the rest seems like it's coming in pension and insurance, right?
Pension levy.
Yeah.
Levy, yep.
Pension was $1 million, so we went from roughly 30% to 40% of salary, right?
Yeah.
And that expense is listed in the.
About
police department.
$900,000 change, yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, next.
So this is the village manager's office. George just asked me that I kind of speak to it. So nothing significant other than a couple position changes. From 2018 to 2019, the management analyst position was moved to BIS, and then for 2020, it's being moved back into the village manager's budget. So it's not an increase in headcount; it's just a transfer from one department to the other. In addition, in 2019, we had kind of a mixed development services director AVM position, so a percentage of that was charged to the village manager's office, and that no longer exists. So those are really the significant staffing changes. Stefana, I don't know if do you want to add?
The receptionist position also was not filled after June of this year due to the retirement incentives.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
Anne Marie, without too much detail, what's in the salary number for 2020, the 570?
I can get that really quick.
What positions does that fund?
Yep, hold on one second. So, get my notes on the next page. So we've got village manager, assistant village manager, we've got a transition manager, management analyst, and then the executive assistant to the village manager. There's also 2 part-time
How much is
clerks.
allocated for the transition manager?
The total compensation and benefits for 2020 is $109,000.
So you got the village manager, the assistant village manager, and then a transition period.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Aye.
Trustee Calendro.
And how long is that transitional period? Is it the whole year, or what are we planning for?
Let me just look at this really quick. The hours that are budgeted are 1,200. Do you want to?
This is, obviously, all of that still has to be worked out, and hopefully I can have more information for everybody on the 28th about the hours and all of that.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
I anxiously await greater details on the 28th.
I'm sure you do. Any other comments?
I have a question. Who recommended
Fenn.
that position or approved that position?
I'm going to defer to the village manager.
I don't know exactly how, this is day 4 for George, but,
Let's go, George. You need to have this information.
but, it's something that I will look more into, and I'll have more information for the board on the 28th.
So is that position also in place from now till the end of December of 19?
Is it budgeted for the rest of the year? Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead and move on.
No, it's okay. We're good. Dave, you up here? Yeah.
Mayor and trustees, I'd like to present to you the Department of Business Information Services fiscal year proposed budget for 2020. As I've said, IT is the nervous system of the village, and all our information passes through our systems and infrastructure. During the past 4 months of my tenure as CTO, I identified the need to develop a more secure, sustainable, and reliable foundation for our IT infrastructure. The upgrades included in this budget are critical to supporting technology that enables our village's departments to provide an effective, efficient services to our residents at the greatest value now and in the foreseeable future. So with that being said, our budget is roughly 3.1 million, very similar to last year's budget, maybe down slightly. And I will be happy to take any of your questions.
Any questions? Mr. Mayor? Trustee Healy?
There's a line on here, David, for online services. It's gone from projected to be $1 million down to 301. And I just wonder, how did that happen?
Okay.
That was your reclass.
Right. Basically, that was a lot of implementation, one-time charges for the UltiPro HCM and some of the Tyler software. And so once that falls out of implementation, the maintenance for those systems moves into the maintenance fund.
Yeah, so you can see if you go down a few line items, the maintenance line item increased from about 400,000 up to about 861. And that's because, like Dave said, we were in implementation and now we're live and we're paying maintenance instead.
Okay. Thank you. Excuse me.
Any other questions?
Mayor Peacock?
Trustee Dodge?
Just so thank you for pointing that out. So there's obviously an uptick in the maintenance of the software maintenance, right? So
correct.
What if going forward we could classify that as software maintenance charges as opposed to just computer? But that's a minor point. And it looks like a fair bit of expenditure on both the electronic equipment, which I think is all the network-related rebuilds.
The electric equipment.
28. I'm on page 28.
Okay. The electric equipment and supplies, that line item, most of that is the money for the new telephone system.
Okay, got it. And then with the hardware, we're in a replacement cycle, correct?
The replacement cycle, I believe, is in computer hardware.
Got it.
Above that.
And there's about 120K for workstations and about 65 for our network switches.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Go. So Finance Department, our regular budget, about $1.5 million. Variances as compared to the 2019 budget. The 2020 budget includes the elimination of the full-time payroll position on 6/30 of 2020. So that's probably the most significant difference. Also, there's a slight difference due to the fact that 2020 is not a vehicle sticker year, so we don't have any of the printing cost or the postage costs related to the vehicle sticker sale. The water fund, where finance is, I have staff that are exclusively charged to the water fund because they only do water billing. So we have a couple of employees in there. No really major changes other than the cost of water that we're going to be buying from the city of Chicago. We did see a large decline in revenue, which obviously would have an offsetting decline in consumption. So therefore, we're not buying as much water. And then we're going to be doing a rate study in early to mid 2020 because the last rate, 2020 is the last year that our rates are set by ordinance. So we'll be going out and doing a study.
Mayor Peacock?
Trustee Dodge?
Do we have, we're still doing a lot of work with the whole south west service, Oak Lawn, that all is factored in.
Yeah, the debt service for that project is built into the budget.
Do we have any evidence? Previously, Chicago has signaled when it was going to start raising the rates for the water. Do we have any evidence that that's coming again?
Not like it was the last few years, where I think we had a 25%, 15%, 15. The last few years, I think the max now is 3% of cost of living. I think last year our increase was about 1.9%, if I remember correctly. And we don't have the notification yet for 2020, but there's no indication that it's going to be
massive like it
Massive,
was.
right.
Okay, no, that's a bit of good news, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Fenton?
Do we have, obviously, people are conserving more on their usage of water. So do we have any information that shows how well the residents are conserving water? Not only because the price goes up from May to September, but it looks like they're really being conservative.
Yeah, I mean, we have consumption reports that we look at on a monthly basis that shows consumption, and we compare 2017 to 2018 to 2019. So we do see that steady decline as far as, what area of the village it's in, whether it's in single-family, multifamily. We don't really have that level of detail, but we do definitely see that that decline in consumption.
That's good. Good for our residents.
And I guess one of the things I'd be careful of making the leap that it's just everyone, I mean, it's great that we're consuming less, but the reality is we've had an awful lot of rain and hardly anyone had to water their lawns at all. So
That's true, but still,
one
we
of the
get that
biggest-
kudos out there
That's
for
one of the biggest
conservation.
reasons as well, so.
Yeah, and that's why we don't just look from year to year. We kind of look over a number of years to kind of smooth out that weather effect.
Right, so.
That it? So this slide is just the officials and the clerks. I'm not sure if Mayor Pico or Casey, if you guys have anything you want to add.
Sure, I can jump on. Let me get over to that page, though. I can speak to the officials
Page
anyway.
25, 26.
There's really, on the officials' budget, there's no real significant change, other than potentially traveling to Vegas for ICSC, knowing that Seritage is going to be ramping up again their leasing as well as hopefully structure development with the, once the MDA is complete. So there's a potential for that. I think other than that, everything pretty much stayed the same.
As far as the clerk's office, I know that the clerk has been working with the village manager, and if the village manager would like to address it, that would be fine.
So I have a meeting scheduled with the city clerk, and we're going to, on the 28th, we'll have more information for the board as far as their budget, any kind of significant changes.
Any questions? Okay.
Veterans Commission, Tom, you want to do this one?
It's really not much of a significant change in 2019. Through donations and the golf outing, they brought in more revenue than their expenses. The biggest expense next year that they're anticipating will be 2 new panels for the Veterans Memorial. The quote that they have right now, the lowest quote is $8,400 for the 2 panels. When you add the cost of the panels and the cost of engraving, the total cost comes out to about $41,000, where the total revenue is $88,000. So over a period of time, the panels will pay for themselves pretty quickly. So.
Okay. Any questions on that?
So I'm just going to kind of quickly cover this one. Budget for the other commissions, planning, zoning, and fire and police. The majority of the budget is related to the Fire and Police Commission. It's pretty consistent from year to year.
It's medical testing and hiring for the most
Yeah.
part?
Yep.
Okay.
So non-departmental looks big. That's where we record all of our interfund transfers. So it's the interfund transfer from the general fund to the Recreation and Parks Fund, the transfer to the Capital Improvement Fund. We also have our legal services in that budget. We did include an increase as compared to 19 for 2020 legal fees due to the fact that we're negotiating with the 5 bargaining units. So that's really the significant differences. Also in that fund, and I don't have it up here, is the sales tax rebates that, or in that department, I should say, the sales tax rebates that we have with the various entities in the village.
And Anne Marie, as we talked about, we're expecting that those rebates will probably be higher, but they'll be offset with higher sales tax revenue.
Let's hope so.
If that's the case.
Let's hope so.
Because we're very conservative with what we assume for by mile. Right?
Yeah, and most of those rebates are capped at a certain amount, so once we get to that cap, they're done.
Okay. Trustee Dutch.
So 900 grand for the lawyers and 150 grand for various consulting services. Do we have any other definition on consulting services?
So you want to, okay, I got it. So the consulting services was just with the number, the amount of turnover that's going on in the various departments, sometimes the need for outsourcing when we don't know that it's going to occur. We just set aside some funds so that we have it available should any department have a need for that outside help for any given time, or consulting, legal fees, anything like that. We usually do this on an annual basis. We did increase it a little bit this year because of the turnover of staff and the vacancies in the various departments.
So you think it's worth a doubling from 66 to 150, at least a doubling?
I don't know that we'll use it. It's one of those that there's not a specific plan for it, but it's there should the need arise. Obviously, anything that we use in that line item that's over $20,000 is going to be brought to the board for approval.
Yeah. Per our normal process, got it.
Per our normal, yep.
Any other questions? So my only comment on the consulting is, relative to how it's used to backfill departments when they're short staff. I would imagine that will be first used from their budgets if it's specifically for those needs.
Yes, if it's available, absolutely. So we've kind of covered all the departments that we're going to present tonight, so we can kind of talk through the personnel and discretionary requests if there's no other questions. I'm just going to kind of introduce it, and then obviously the department head would answer any questions that you all have. So I did it a little bit different than the other night because it was really hard to tell what was approved and what wasn't. So the items in red are those that the village manager did not approve or does not think that we should move forward. Those that are bolded in the black are the ones that were approved by the village manager and will be added to the proposed budget when we bring it back to you on October 28th. So if there's any questions on any of these, we can kind of go through them.
Are there any questions on this page?
Mayor Peacock?
Trustee Dutch.
So just a little bit of the background. I mean, if we've expanded their skill and we've expanded their responsibilities, this certainly makes sense. I just want to make sure that we're not doing what I think has happened historically in the past, which is reclassifications as a way to address what some would perceive as underpayment and or an adjustment to the scales. So I'd like to hear the justification.
Yeah, in terms of the positions, our current HR generalist, Angela Rigo, she really is the right hand of the department. If I'm not there, she's capable of working in a director capacity. She has the skills and abilities to be the assistant director of the department, and I feel that that's warranted based on her level of experience and the abilities that she has. Regina Early is our HR coordinator, and over this past year, she has taken on more responsibility and more of a lead role on the recruitment, not just of the seasonal and the part-time employees, but working with departments on full-time positions, and is more involved in project works and raising to that level of HR generalist. So I'm seeking funds to be able to make that type of promotion in 2020 because I believe she's been working at that level.
Any other questions? On to the next page.
She's trying. This keyboard is really acting up. Maybe the battery's dead. Dave? There you go. Okay, so I just wanted to mention the three at the top. I did miss these the other night when we talked about the discretionary requests. The Civic Center does have three of them that were recommended by the village manager's office. So we kind of missed putting these on the slide the other night. So I just wanted to kind of cover those. If there's questions on the other ones, kind of the training-related ones, I think that Stefana would be able to answer. The subsidy to open lands and Stellwagen, that's continuing a practice that we've done year after year. We transfer funds from the general fund to cover the operating costs of those 501c3 entities that are part of the village. We did reflect that already in the proposed budget, so it's kind of a double count, but I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that we're continuing that practice for 2020. If the money's not spent, it doesn't get transferred, so it only gets transferred upon actually incurring the expenditure.
Any questions on this? Trustee Calendar.
What exactly is the 21 census program? I understand the concept. I was wondering what that 20K is going for.
I can comment on a little bit, then Tom, I guess, can as well, because I think that's one of the planned uses is to coordinate that. But the census is pretty important for us to count everybody. We don't have the same problem counting as some other towns do, but we still have a problem. We need to make sure everyone's counted because that obviously the money spent here and the money having someone honchoing that program is well worth it because of the reimbursements we get. Our LGDF fund is per capita, so it's pretty critical that we have the right amount of people. If we don't get the right count, then we're going to be shorted funds from the state and from the federal government. So it's pretty important that we get this right.
So there's no specific plan for exactly how the $20,000 will be used, and it certainly won't be exceeded. But basically, the plan is to make sure we get as accurate a count as we can within Orland Park. We've already got BIS who's already working with the Census Bureau in Cook County, and the thought is in early spring we'd start programs for community outreach to let them know how important it is to get the vote out and make sure we contact areas of concentration of voters to make sure we're getting the vote out, such as schools might be a target, homes for the elderly, and things of that nature. The whole intent of the program is to get as accurate count as we can, because for the next 10 years it's going to help certainly impact revenue sharing from the federal and the state level.
And we've had some multifamily come online in the last 5 years, a pretty significant amount of it. So that tends to be a little bit more transient than our home ownership, which we know is the highest in the country, but we still need to make sure we get those counts. And we got to make sure that people don't just throw them away. And so there'll be a marketing and then a remarketing effort to go to those houses that we know exist that we haven't received it from yet.
I think I was just wondering if there's personnel or if it's more of campaign material, soft costs, so to speak, I guess. That's all I wanted to know. It sounds like it's going to be
More soft costs.
More soft costs than personnel. There'll be no personnel costs included in that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge.
It certainly makes sense to invest in this. I'm assuming we'll see the details when the program starts coming up or the expenditures start happening.
Yes.
Any other questions on these?
Any other questions on this
We have a few
page?
more pages of them.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Dave, now we need a new keyboard. Okay. So we've got HR, Veterans Commission, and Police. I don't know if you guys have any questions on any of them. Some of them were partially approved, others were fully approved.
I think the one to explain is the temporary contract at HR General. So there's a good reason for this one. It's a big number. You can explain.
Next year, every year, HR is tasked with a number of different things, but we're rolling out a number of initiatives now through the next year that are pretty significant with the strategic goals of the village, which include the merit-based compensation program, which will require us to do a lot of work as it relates to the compensation program, as well as training managers, revamping our performance evaluation system. We're also in the midst of the implementation of the human capital management system, which is expected to go live in January of 2020. Right now, we do have someone assisting us with the dual maintenance who is a contractor, and it's been a huge help to our function in being able to have those hands and that HR expertise in being able to work through that dual maintenance. We envision that we will still need some assistance with training and rollout of that HCM and working through some of the additional modules that we'll continue to implement in 2020. In addition, we're going to see more recruitment because some of those positions that were vacated with the early retirement incentive. In June of this year, we're going to be doing some recruiting at the beginning of the year, or looking to have those positions filled at the beginning of the year because of that 6-month window, as well as they're still, the retirement program runs through the end of June of 2020, so we'll see additional recruitment as well as administration that's needed for those retirement plans. So, and that's on top of our regular workload that includes rehiring, hiring about 300 people per year because of the seasonal crowd.
And most importantly, you're also down a person, right, for probably the first couple months of the year?
We should be back fully staffed within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Mayor Pecon?
Trustee Dodge?
Certainly makes sense with the workload that was just laid out to surge the capacity, so don't have a challenge with that. And I guess broadly, would rather see you reach into the marketplace for contracted help than bringing staff on board. 15,000 for HR recruitment, you think we'll have that kind of uptick in expenditures given what we're doing?
What I'd like to do is have some money budgeted ahead of time in the event that we need to use outside search services, which can cost between $5,000 and $20,000 on a search, depending on what that is. We may have to reach out to other services, depending on the types of opportunities that might cost more than our average using an online service. It just depends on the positions that open up and the difficulties that we have. There have been some positions this year that have been slower to fill and to find candidates, where if we had some additional budgeted dollars, we might be able to throw it at a recruitment campaign with a LinkedIn or with one of the other services out there that might hit it a little bit stronger. So I think as we see additional openings becoming available, having funds already allocated would be helpful.
And if I'm not mistaken, through the ERI, we're expecting to have at least a full handful of directors, which are going to be more likely to need these types of services than some of our lower level positions. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Anything else on this page?
Any other questions?
Okay, so this is a long list, building maintenance and then the water and sewer fund. I just want to make a note on the water and sewer fund. Those expenditures that are listed here as discretionary will be able to fit into the fund and still maintain the revenue based upon the rates that are in place. But we definitely need to go out and do a rate study next year.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton?
One of the things I've just noticed in discretionary, these two sheets that you gave us, there's supposed to be 3, and I only have 2. Trustee Callen.
Is there a backside?
So it was brought to my attention by Rich that 2 items were in discretionary, and the other night we spoke about items that were for maintenance purposes, that we need to include those, find a way to include those in the budget. So if it's okay, I'd like to let Rich explain 2 of the items. One is 3, they've been replacing windows at the police station. They did 3 this past year, and they were requesting to do 3 more. And it's not there, but it's on that other sheet that was just shown to me before the meeting, which is the sheet we're missing.
$1,000,002.
And then there's the other, go ahead, with the testing and replacement.
Right, the other item was the RPZ testing and repairs. We have in the budget to do the RPZ testing, which is required annually to keep everything compliant. But the discretionary was the repairs. Every year, the RPZs require repairs. It's hard to predict exactly how much. We asked for $12,000 to cover those repairs. I think we just had some done this year that was about $8,000 to cover from last year's inspection. So if we could possibly get that included, that would be helpful.
So you weren't here for Tuesday night's meeting, but George was. These kinds of items are not discretionary. They should be in our budget regularly, and I know this is George's 4th day, so we'll cut some slack. But in the future, next year's, if it's something, we have to fix an RPZ. If we know that's what it's costing, it shouldn't be a discretionary fund. There's other things on here that are not discretionary, like I would say algae controls in our wet basins, probably not a discretionary item. Maybe fixing a few windows is, but there's certain things in here that are definitely, that we have to budget for, and if that means something else has to come out, we have to make those calls. But
Okay. First, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Trustee Dodge.
To address the 2-page thing, we will look into that, and if there are items that the village manager recommended for inclusion in the budget that were not on these slides, we'll bring them on the 28th before the board.
Okay, these two were not recommended, so that's why I was bringing it up,
Oh, okay, okay,
because they're repairs.
yes.
It's not a wish list.
Yeah, and I think, and I totally get your point that they're not discretionary, they're things that absolutely need to happen. But I think what the departments were running into is that their budgets have been cut quite a bit over the last few years, and they don't have something they can take out of it to fit this kind of stuff in. I know you're looking at a little skeptical, but I truly think that that is what's going on. Can they do a little better job of digging and seeing if there's any dollars available to take out? Probably, but I think the budgets are pretty tight, so it's hard to fit these things in.
I guess my comment on that would be I don't buy that.
Okay.
I think you can find those efficiencies, you can find those savings, and I think George knows that's part of what he's going to be doing the next year before the next budget comes in.
Yeah.
So.
Mayor Pecan?
I mean, if these meters break, you have to fix them.
Right,
Well,
understood.
absolutely, but,
Right.
but these budgets are huge, and so there's other places where we can look to be efficient and do things. We've talked about several of them in the past that we still aren't really necessarily doing, so that create efficiencies. Trustee Dodge.
So one, I want to thank you for reminding staff that if it needs to be done, it's hardly discretionary, right? So then it becomes a judgment call on finding the funding. And so, question for Anne Marie, if I do a little bit of ocular math on this page, we're talking about 200 grand in terms of what was asked for versus what we're not spending, round numbers.
Okay.
37 here, 20 there, 60 there, just call it 200 grand for talking points. You know, it feels to me that if staff who's closest to these line parts of the business are saying, I really do need to do some drainage improvements or some additional restorations, I get we were managing to a number, but it seems we're precisely at the part of the budget to say, okay, relieve a little bit of that pressure and see if we can't figure this out. So I think, does that make sense what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because if these things, if concrete and asphalt restorations, you wouldn't ask for it if you didn't think it was needed, correct? And so if that helps us on this multi-year journey, multi-million-dollar march towards a better state of repair for a lot of equipment, then I think we should probably put it back in and figure out where we're going to find the dollars, is what I would state.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, concrete and asphalt restorations and drainage improvements sounds like things that are going along with some projects that we have, so that would seem to fallen under the capital requests that we had before, which we certainly have indicated as a board we're open to, as Trustee Dodge said, finding the way to get this done, to get caught up on these things.
So that's just, broadly, just, it's important. So I appreciate keeping the screw press on in terms of this, so that's the right thing to do from a process perspective. And then second point, I'll iterate or add to the comments that the mayor made. I think over the years we have been working on squeezing out a lot of normal inefficiencies in the organization. We've made some runs at improving technology to enhance the throughput from our staff, but we're now at the place where you're starting to talk about we really do need to think about the business model, which is where I think you're now in your third day, and I promised on your third day we'll pressure you for more process savings.
He's in
Here you
day
are.
4.
Day 4?
And so-
Yeah, so you should have them already.
It's not over with yet.
Yeah, philosophically, I think that the budget overall makes sense because we're not continuing to hammer the expenses down for a lot of reasons. I think staff's done a pretty good job of pulling together, but starting tomorrow, when do we keep pulling costs and time out of the system? So just want to add that commentary.
And I guess where I'll add is George and I spoke today about this, and as he said, where he came from, they looked at this every time they lost a position or whatever. How can we change that so then when the tough times do come, you've already made the decisions you've had to make, so you don't have to make rash ones. And I think that's pretty important. And George hasn't heard me say this, but I know that everybody else and all the other department heads, and I think everyone else in this room, not a citizen, has heard me say that it's the little efficiencies you save every day. And when you have 24 crews out there, and you save, someone in your crew finds a 5-minute savings, it saves every crew 5 minutes. That's 2 crew hours a day. And over the course of a year, that's 1 crew for an entire 3 months that you've got time for them to get stuff done. So those little itty bitty savings don't seem like a hell of a lot, but they add up when you start multiplying them across the entire organizations. And even, some of our youngest employees and least experienced employees might look at something and say, this is a really stupid way to do this, there's a better way. And nobody else has seen it because they've been doing it that way for 20 years. So we need to just keep working on those types of things.
Anything else on here?
Anything else on this one?
So I'm just going to run through these funds, just to say we covered them. They're in the budget. They're part of the overall proposed. Motor fuel tax, obviously, that's the tax we get from the state. That would be the transfer out to the general fund, as well as the $750,000 that we budgeted to transfer to capital. Park development, we already talked about when we covered the capital budget. Home rule sales tax and Main Street Triangle, we also covered both of those when we talked about the capital budget. Commuter parking, we're looking at about $400,000 in spending. We did look at our revenues are not projected to totally cover our expenditures for 2020. So I spoke with George about it yesterday, and we're kind of looking at a couple different things we can do to make that fund work. Construction funds, capital improvement, we obviously covered all of that with the capital budget. The insurance fund, that's where all of our property, liability, health insurance, dental, vision, all of our premiums are paid out of. That fund is obviously funded by transfers from the various funds that hold personnel. Debt service, that's all of the debt service payments we have. We utilize both the home rule sales tax and the property tax levy to make those payments. And we'll be bringing you the property tax levy at the beginning of December. So you'll see how much of the levy is going towards debt service payments. And then we have our two trust funds, our retiree and OPEB fund that we established last year, as well as our longstanding police pension fund. And I think that's it.
Any other questions? Any comments from the public? No one signed in.
Can you just flip? So just as George mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to meet again on the 28th. If the board has any amendments that they would like to propose to the proposed budget that we gave you, if you could please send those to George and I no later than next Wednesday, so that we can prepare our presentation for the 28th, bringing you the final proposed budget with all changes made. We'll modify it for the discretionary that's been approved. We have some changes that we've uncovered over the last week or so that we'll bring to you. So if you have anything that you want modified, we'll have it on a list, and the board will review it, look at it, approve it, and then if it's approved, we'll include it in the overall budget we bring in December. And then also, as George mentioned, we're going to be bringing a salary ordinance and all of the 2020 budgeted positions to the board on October 28th for review.
I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for, what are we going in for?
Appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, dismissal, specific village employees, and purchase or lease of real property for the use of the village.
Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Kellen Jones? Aye. Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Maloney?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
I'd like to, Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Healy?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the full and final resignation and release agreement with Michael Coleman.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Fitton?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Calendro?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Mayor Peacock?
Aye. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Fitton?
Aye.
Trustee Calendro?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Healy?
Aye.
Trustee Malani?
Aye.
Mayor Peacock?
Aye.